Prologue. Paradise Lost. The American dream had always painted a vivid picture in my mind. A peaceful suburban sanctuary where neighbors waved cheerfully across manicured lawns and children's laughter echoed through tree-lined streets. That's exactly what Sterling Heights promised with its gleaming brochures and carefully staged open houses. But like many dreams, the reality proved far more complex and considerably more sinister. I remember the day I first drove through those wrought iron gates, my moving truck following close behind. The development's entrance featured an impressive stone fountain, water cascading in elegant arcs, while purple and yellow pansies danced in the spring breeze. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, as I would soon discover. For behind this facade of suburban tranquility lurked a force more destructive than any natural disaster. A man named Todd Blackwood, the president of our Homeowners Association. Chapter 1. The First Warning Signs. My introduction to Todd came just 3 days after moving in. I was still unpacking boxes when a sharp knock interrupted my morning coffee. Opening the door, I found myself face to face with a man whose very presence seemed to demand attention. Todd stood about 6 feet tall, with prematurely graying hair that he wore slicked back in a style reminiscent of a 1980s Wall Street banker. His polo shirt bore the HOA's logo, an unnecessary reminder of his authority that he nonetheless wore like a badge of honor. "Welcome to Sterling Heights," he said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "I noticed your garbage bins are still out. They should have been in by 9 a.m. He glanced at his watch with exaggerated precision. "It's 9:17. I apologized, explaining that I was still learning the community's rules. His response would set the tone for everything that followed. "Rules are the foundation of our community's excellence. The fine is $200. You'll receive the official notice this afternoon." Before I could protest, he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving me standing in my doorway, mouth agape. That evening, I discovered I wasn't alone in my experience with Todd. My next-door neighbor, Sarah Chen, a retired school teacher who had lived in Sterling Heights for 15 years, shared her own stories over a welcome-to-the-neighborhood dinner. "Todd's been president for 5 years, she explained, her voice dropping to a whisper, despite us being in her kitchen. "Every year he finds new ways to tighten his grip. Did you know he installed cameras at the community pool without board approval? Said it was for security, but we all know it's for monitoring who comes and goes." Sarah's stories painted a picture of a man who had transformed from an overzealous HOA board member into something far more dangerous, a petty tyrant who wielded his power like a weapon, targeting anyone who dared question his authority. Chapter 2. The Catalyst. My personal breaking point came 3 months after moving in. I had meticulously followed every HOA guideline while renovating my backyard, including submitting detailed plans for a new fence. The approved color was rustic oak, a specific stain manufactured by a single company. When I discovered the manufacturer had discontinued the line, I chose the closest match available and documented everything: the discontinued notice, color samples, and communication with multiple suppliers. Todd's response to my explanation was a masterclass in casual cruelty. During the next board meeting, he held up my documentation like a prosecutor presenting evidence of a capital crime. "Rules exist for a reason," he announced to the room. "Making exceptions leads to chaos. The fine stands at $500, with an additional $50 per day until the fence is brought into compliance." What happened next revealed Todd's true character. As I left the meeting, I noticed something odd about his own backyard, visible from the parking lot. His fence appeared newer than the others, and definitely taller than the 6-foot maximum specified in the HOA guidelines. A quick check of county records showed no permits had been filed for the construction. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Todd Blackwood needed to be stopped, not just for my sake, but for the entire community. However, I knew that direct confrontation would be futile. Todd had spent years consolidating his power, surrounding himself with allies and silencing opposition. No, this would require a different approach, something methodical, legal, and absolutely devastating. Chapter 3. Becoming the Inside Man. The first phase of my plan required patience, something Todd severely lacked. I began attending every HOA meeting, arriving early and staying late. I volunteered for committees, offered to take minutes, and generally made myself useful without drawing attention to my true intentions. "You seem very engaged in community matters," Todd remarked during one meeting, his tone suggesting both approval and subtle warning. "We need more young people like you getting involved." I played my role perfectly, the eager newcomer, slightly naive but earnest. I asked questions but never challenged answers. I voiced concerns but always accepted explanations. Most importantly, I watched and learned. Todd's methodology became clear over time. He manipulated meeting schedules to ensure key votes happened when his supporters were present and his critics were absent. He buried important financial discussions in mountains of trivial matters, wearing down attendees until they would approve anything just to go home. But his most effective tactic was simple intimidation. I witnessed this firsthand when Linda Martinez, a single mother who lived on Maple Drive, questioned the necessity of new landscaping contracts. Todd's response was swift and brutal. Within weeks, she received violation notices for everything from improper mailbox maintenance to unauthorized plant species in visible planters. The message was clear. Challenge Todd, and your life becomes difficult. Chapter 4. Following the Money Trail. The turning point came during my second year in Sterling Heights. As I gained Todd's trust, I was appointed to the Financial Oversight Committee, a position that had been largely ceremonial under his reign. But it gave me access to something crucial: the HOA's financial records. At first glance, everything appeared normal. The books balanced, the numbers added up, and all the appropriate forms were filed. But something felt off. Our HOA fees were nearly double those of similar communities in the area, yet our amenities were deteriorating. The community pool, once the crown jewel of Sterling Heights, was closed more often than it was open. The playground equipment showed signs of rust and wear. The landscaping, despite substantial budget allocations, looked increasingly neglected. I began cross-referencing invoices with bank statements, creating spreadsheets that tracked every dollar flowing in and out of HOA accounts. The pattern that emerged was both shocking and sophisticated. Todd had created a complex web of shell companies and inflated contracts, all designed to funnel money away from community improvements and into private accounts. The smoking gun came in the form of a landscaping company called Green Valley Enterprises. On paper, they received over $15,000 monthly for maintenance services. But when I drove to their listed address, I found an empty office in a strip mall. Further investigation revealed the company had been registered just 2 days after Todd became HOA president, with his brother-in-law listed as the principal owner. Chapter 5. Building the Case. Gathering evidence required extreme caution. Todd had eyes everywhere, and I knew one wrong move would alert him to my investigation. I created a secure digital archive, storing copies of every suspicious transaction, every questionable contract, and every irregularity I discovered. Key findings included over $50,000 in unexplained administrative expenses paid to various shell companies, multiple instances of double billing for maintenance services, personal purchases disguised as community expenses, unauthorized transfers between HOA accounts, selective enforcement of fines, with certain homeowners, particularly Todd's allies, receiving preferential treatment. But documents alone weren't enough. I needed witnesses. Through careful networking, I connected with former board members who had been pushed out by Todd. Each had pieces of the puzzle, stories of intimidation, evidence of financial misconduct, and details of Todd's systematic takeover of the HOA. Ellen Fitzgerald, the former treasurer, provided particularly damning testimony. Todd forced me out when I questioned a series of unusual payments, she revealed during one of our clandestine meetings. He threatened to expose personal information about my family if I didn't resign. I was too scared to fight back then, but I kept copies of everything. Chapter 6. The Alliance Building. A coalition required careful planning. I couldn't risk Todd discovering our organization before we were ready to act. I began with small gatherings, coffee meetings, backyard barbecues, casual conversations that gradually turned to community concerns. Sarah Chen proved invaluable in this phase. As a longtime resident, she knew everyone's stories and grievances. She helped identify potential allies and those who might warn Todd of our activities. We created a secure communication network using encrypted messaging apps, sharing information and coordinating our efforts while maintaining absolute secrecy. Our group grew slowly but steadily. We called ourselves the Sterling Heights Improvement Committee, or SHIS, an innocent-sounding name that wouldn't raise suspicions. Each member brought unique skills and resources to our cause. Marcus Rodriguez, a corporate lawyer, reviewed our evidence and helped structure our legal strategy. Jennifer Wong, a forensic accountant, analyzed our financial findings and uncovered even more irregularities. Chapter 7. The Preparation. Timing was crucial. The annual HOA meeting was approaching, our one chance to present our case before the entire community. We needed irrefutable evidence, witnesses willing to testify, and enough angry homeowners to force a vote. We prepared multiple dossiers. 1. A comprehensive financial audit showing years of mismanagement and theft. 2. Sworn statements from contractors who had been forced to participate in Todd's schemes. 3. Documentation of selective rule enforcement and personal vendettas. 4. Evidence of permit violations and illegal construction on Todd's property. 5. A detailed timeline of HOA decline under Todd's leadership. But our most powerful weapon was something Todd never expected: community solidarity. Years of his tyranny had created a reservoir of resentment just waiting to be tapped. We organized carefully, ensuring every block had at least one informed representative who could mobilize their neighbors for the crucial meeting. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The annual meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in the community center. Typically, these meetings drew maybe 20 people. This time, over 200 residents packed the room, with more streaming in as the meeting began. Todd noticed the unusual attendance but didn't seem concerned. He had weathered challenges before and clearly believed this would be no different. He opened the meeting with his usual self-congratulatory speech about his dedication to the community. I waited until he finished, then stood. "Mr. President, I have some questions about the financial reports." My voice was calm, professional, betraying none of the anticipation I felt. Todd's dismissive wave was exactly what we had expected. "We can discuss any concerns privately after the meeting." "Actually," I replied, "according to HOA bylaws, Section 7.3, financial concerns must be addressed during the general meeting when raised by a member in good standing." I nodded to Marcus, who began distributing our prepared packets to every attendee. The room fell silent as people began reading. Todd's face turned pale as he realized what was happening. He tried to adjourn the meeting, but Jennifer Wong was ready. "Point of order," she called out. "The motion to adjourn requires a majority vote when official business is under discussion." For the next 2 hours, we methodically presented our case. Former contractors testified about kickback schemes. Ellen Fitzgerald detailed the financial manipulation she had witnessed. Homeowners shared stories of intimidation and selective enforcement. Todd's attempts to defend himself only made things worse. When he claimed ignorance of the shell companies, we produced documents bearing his signature. When he blamed accounting errors on others, We showed evidence of his direct involvement in every transaction. Chapter 9. The Fall. The vote to remove Todd as president was nearly unanimous. Only his wife and brother-in-law opposed it. But removal was just the beginning. Within days, we had filed formal complaints with state authorities, initiated a civil lawsuit to recover misappropriated funds, reported violations to various regulatory agencies, contacted local media with our findings. The investigation that followed revealed even more than we had uncovered. Todd's scheme extended beyond Sterling Heights. He had been involved in similar operations at other HOAs in the region. The total amount stolen exceeded $100,000, and the web of corruption involved multiple accomplices. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The transformation of Sterling Heights was remarkable. Under new leadership, a rotating board with strict term limits and transparency requirements, the community flourished. We reduced HOA fees by 30%, renovated all common areas, implemented an online portal for financial transparency, created fair and consistent enforcement procedures, established a community mediation program for disputes. Todd's personal fall was equally dramatic. Faced with criminal charges and civil lawsuits, he was forced to sell his house at a loss to pay legal fees and restitution. His professional reputation was destroyed, and his attempts to start fresh in other communities were thwarted by his now public history. Epilogue. Lessons learned. Today, Sterling Heights stands as a model for how HOAs should operate. We host workshops for other communities dealing with similar issues, sharing our experience and the systems we put in place to prevent abuse of power. The pool is always open now, filled with laughing children and families enjoying summer days. The playgrounds are safe and well-maintained. Most importantly, neighbors talk to each other again, sharing concerns and working together to maintain our community. As for Todd, I heard he moved to an apartment in another state. Sometimes when new residents ask about the Todd era, it seems almost like a dark fairy tale. Hard to believe it really happened. But those of us who lived through it know better. We know that justice doesn't always come quickly or easily, but with patience, preparation, and persistence, even the most entrenched tyrant can be brought down. The American dream. I saw it when moving to Sterling Heights finally exists, not because it was given to us, but because we fought for it, together. And that makes it all the more precious. Reflections. 5 years later. Looking back on those events now, I realize that Todd's reign, while traumatic, taught our community valuable lessons about vigilance, unity, and the importance of active participation in local governance. The systems we put in place have become a blueprint for HOA reform across the state. The story of Sterling Heights continues to evolve. We've added community gardens, solar panels on common buildings, and a robust recycling program. Our property values have increased significantly, not because of draconian rules, but because people genuinely want to live here. Perhaps the most satisfying outcome is the sense of community that has emerged from the ashes of Todd's regime. New residents are welcomed warmly, rules are enforced fairly, and problems are solved through open dialogue rather than intimidation. The fountain at our entrance still flows, but now it seems to sing a different tune, one of triumph, resilience, and the power of ordinary people standing together against injustice. And every time I drive past it, I smile, knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's building something better in its place.